What we're going to do is walk through this exhibition, Culture Mixmaster Zhang Hongtu, and talk about a few pieces of Hongtu's work. Both Zhang Hongtu and Dan, in their works, address the experience of being Asian American. What does it mean to be someone who within themselves have roots in more than one culture? And so, we'll be picking some pieces to talk about that, and Dan will share with us his experience and his perspective, which, have links to, have connections to Hongtu's work, but also, a different perspective. So I just want to mention that and by the way, this is our director, Linda Duke. And Linda will be giving you a survey, and if you could please, write some comments for us before you leave, and give it to me or give it to someone at our desk over there. Alex, is that right? Yeah, I'll give it to Alex. We would really, really appreciate your feedback. And also, yes, another thing to remind you, this whole session is being recorded. And so if you don't mind being in the shot, then you don't need to worry. But if you don't want to appear in the film, then please make sure you're behind the camera, okay? Any questions? Okay, great. So let's start. Let's go over here. And we'll start with a self-portrait by artist Zhang Hongtu. And so here I'll just explain for those of you who are not familiar with how Chinese names are traditionally listed. So his name is in the traditional Chinese format. So Zhang is his last name and Hongtu is his first name. And you guys can come closer. I want you to take a look at his work. So this is a self-portrait that Hongtu made. And I just want to ask you guys, what is the medium of this? First, what does it look like to you? Like, what kind of artwork is it? Collage. Collage? And what is the medium? What's it made of? Digital. Yeah, it's digital, right? But he framed it in this kind of old-fashioned traditional frame. So you're expecting an oil painting. But in fact, this is an original work of art that is digital. He created it in Photoshop, printed it out on inkjet, then put it in this old-fashioned looking frame. Now, this work is a really great statement about who Hongtu is. So Hongtu was born in China. He got an art degree in Beijing, in the one of the most prestigious art academies in Beijing. But then in 1982, and I should say too that he was born into a Muslim family, which in China is a minority, and lived through the Cultural Revolution when at that time, having a religion was forbidden. And so his family kind of was on this edge of, trying to escape, political persecution. His father was an Arabic scholar, a scholar of Quran who studied in Egypt. And so he was useful to the government, but on the other hand, the government didn't quite completely accept him. So it was really difficult for him growing up. So in 1982, he decided to come to New York to study in the Academy of Art in New York. And, it's Art Student League of New York. And he decided to stay. And so at this point, right, it's now 2018, he's lived in the US for as long as he's lived in China. And, he's absorbed American culture. He's absorbed, Western artistic traditions as well. And this speaks to that, having all these cultural influences, and he's paying homage to all those influences. So first of all, what are you seeing here that you may recognize in terms of art movement or art style? Mona Lisa, great. What is reminding you of Mona Lisa here? Yeah, her pose, right? That's a copy of Mona Lisa's pose. And in fact, even the background is a copy from the painting Mona Lisa. And here I'm going to turn to Dan. And Dan, what else is a reference to art movements or art history that you see?
Well, when I was an art student a long time ago, I loved Cubism. And the way he chops up the face and turns it into different planes and different angles is very clearly his reference to Cubism. And this name, Culture Mixmaster, that's his own label, right? He calls himself, or do you call him?
I came up with that.
Culture Mixmaster. Well, I mean, it's really like everything about the guy is about mixing, you know. It's about mixing the ancient and the modern. It's about mixing the Eastern and Western. It's about mixing mediums, you know, oil painting and digital imagery. And so it just, you know, the fact that he's done this to his face sort of is another perfect expression of how this guy is all about putting things together that you might not ordinarily put together. And based on what Aileen has told me about his life, I mean, it really is an expression of his life experience, is about all these things intermixed and intermingled with each other. So I think it's just such an apt and appropriate self-portrait that he is all these things. He's the ancient and he's the ultra-modern. He is Asian, he is Western, he is, and one thing you will note throughout all this, he has a sense of humor. There's humor in this to me. You know, the fact that he's wearing this funny sweater, very ordinary clothing. That's one of the first things I see in his work is a sense of humor. And we'll see more of it throughout.
And you know, we've talked about his references to Western, you know, Western artistic traditions. Is there anything here that is not Western that you can see? Come closer, you guys. You can come look, right? That's the whole point of experiencing art, is you need to get close and, you know, really look. So please, it's not going to bite you. Come on.
I always got my face right up against a painting.
Yeah.
In the museum.
I'll make sure you don't fall into it, so come on closer. So besides Western, you know, the reference to Western artistic traditions that have been inspirational and influential on him, are there other references that are not Western?
Lettering?
Yeah. So he's got inscriptions on there in Chinese characters. And besides the inscriptions, what else?
Even though it's a copy of the background, it looks more like an Eastern, like Asian style of the background of the landscape.
Well, that's an interesting observation to make, because in fact, this is an exact copy. Basically, he found a reproduction of Mona Lisa and copied that background and just photoshopped it on there. But the fact that you're saying, you know, it kind of reminds you of Chinese landscape painting, you know, brings up the idea of, you know, certain links that Chinese artists and European artists, you know, have, you know, when they look at nature. The other thing that I want to point out are these red squares. You guys see that? So in traditional Chinese painting, very often you'll see these marks. They're called seals, and they're usually the signature of the artist. You know, so it's carved into a stamp and then stamped on. So in this case, Hongtu added that. So he added a Chinese inscription, which would appear in traditional Chinese landscape, and the seal, except the seals are fake, right? That they're not real stamps. They're digital recreations, you know, imitating that kind of look. And so that references his Chinese artistic background. And that's actually a poem that he took from an ancient Chinese scroll, and it basically, the translation is over there, but it basically says, you travel through these mountains, and day in, day out, no matter how much time has passed, the mountains stay the same, which I think is a really great statement about how he thinks about himself. Okay, so any questions about this? Okay, so now let's turn over to that painting over there.
Well, does anybody recognize the style? It's a very famous artist whose style he is imitating. Does anybody recognize it? Van Gogh, yeah. And what's interesting, I didn't realize this, but this is from a series he's done. It's based on a very famous traditional Chinese landscape painting, which is a small reproduction on the wall there. So you can see what he was referencing, but basically recreating this famous traditional painting in a completely different style. And to me, what's remarkable, well, as you can tell from the first self-portrait, his skill, his just pure technical skill as a painter is phenomenal. I mean, his ability to handle a brush and to handle color, that he can kind of morph himself into these different forms. I guess to me, it's sort of about how this painting and much of his work to me represents how in his own mind he is reconciling his own identity as someone who comes from this ancient tradition of Chinese painting, and now is an American living in this Western industrial country. And that all of these to me are sort of an embodiment of that attempt to sort of like fit these pieces of himself together. And what I think what you notice is that there's almost an effortlessness, like in this self-portrait. I mean, it looks like the two forms are really effortlessly combined and very skillfully and gracefully combined. And then also, there's a certain kind of, sometimes there's a certain awkwardness or strangeness where the two forms kind of seem to collide or clash with each other. And somehow they all live together in one piece of art. So that's kind of what this work and many of his works say to me.
Any thoughts about this?
You really should take a look at the little painting, the original that it's referencing. That will tell you a lot.
So we'll move over to the inside and maybe you guys. Actually, I think I want to take this opportunity to have our museum director say a few words, which I should have let her say at the beginning, but I didn't.
Oh, it's okay, Aileen. I had some introductory comments to make about both of our speakers tonight, but I think you did a good job of introducing the program. I mean, I'll just say that Dan Kwong is a pretty renowned performance artist and writer and has been doing performances since 1989.
Yeah.
And we're just really pleased that he agreed to visit K-State and not only participate in something like this, but also put on one of his great performances. So thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
And Aileen, I think, already told you a little bit about herself. She is the curator of this show, also of a show that will be opening on December 4th. It's called Visions. Voices, sorry. Yeah, Art Connecting Asia and the West. It's built from our permanent collection, so a lot of works that show cross-cultural influence. I think you'll find it really interesting. It's a collaboration with some faculty members from the University of Kansas in Lawrence, so we're really pleased to be facilitating that kind of exchange as well. So thank you again for coming tonight.
Thank you, Linda.
So guys, you can come closer. This is another digital work that is not afraid for you to breathe on it. So looking at this, what is it? Can you recognize what this is?
Great Wall.
The Great Wall of China. Is this the Great Wall of China as it would look if you went to China to visit? No. What's different about it?
It's curvier? Or is it always that curvy?
Okay, so it's kind of like snaking through. And it's actually, if you look over there, it's kind of looping back on itself, okay? Not really what Great Wall was. What else?
The holes.
The holes. That's right. So the Great Wall of China originally was built during the first dynasty in China. We're talking about 200 BCE. And it was meant to be along the mountain range of northern China to keep out foreign tribes from coming into China. So it was meant to keep out foreigners. So here,
Sounds a little familiar.
yeah, the wall. So here, Hongtu created a digital work. So he went to China twice, and he visited the Great Wall. He took pictures, then digitally stitched the pictures that he took, and then also altered the wall. And in doing this alteration, what has he done to the wall and the function of the wall? What is the wall now in Zhang Hongtu's version? A passageway? How so? Can you explain?
I don't know. Well, instead of like keeping people out, it's like allowing people in to the other side.
Yeah, with the openings, now you can go back and forth. And it's
It's the kind of thing that would get you in trouble with the Chinese government, probably.
yeah. He has been in trouble with the Chinese government. Dan, what are your feelings when you see this?
Well, it's to me, it's also says something about with today's digital technology, you don't know what's real or not anymore. Images can be so completely manipulated that you can present a completely alternative reality. And so the fact that he was able to do this so exquisitely is just remarkable to me. And again, the way he sort of distorted the wall, the waviness, to me, that's, again, his sense of humor. And also the idea of, as Aileen was saying, totally subverting the original purpose of the wall. It's a very political statement to me. And I love the way that he just collaged these landscapes together. They almost start to become three-dimensional. From a distance, you sort of, it's like, what will your mind accept? From a distance you say, oh yeah, that's that. And then you get closer and you look closer and you realize, oh, wait a minute, that and that and that and that, they're completely different places. So it's sort of, to me, it's like the power of digital technology and how an artist can use that to create this whole alternative world. That, painters were doing that. Hieronymus Bosch, surrealist painters. And so to me, it's like an extension of that kind of surrealist tradition.
Yeah, and Hongtu, kind of created this alternate reality. And again, kind of, he wanted really to emphasize that for him, the better way of life is exchange and not stopping flow, going through back and forth. And he is someone who's benefited from that, right? As an artist, as we saw from his works. The one funny thing that he pointed out when he came here, so this digital work was made specifically for this installation. So I sent him a picture of this wall and the dimensions, and he created this piece for that. So, he has made versions of this Great Wall with gates 3 times. This is the 3rd time. And so every time that he did it, this piece is site-specific. So this one is site-specific for the Beach Museum of Art in Kansas. And Dan was talking about how there's different levels of reality and kind of it becoming surreal. If you look from here towards that side, you see that, kind of the image of the things on there are getting blurrier and blurrier. And maybe you can come back and look later. But by the time you get to that corner, they're almost like paint strokes. It's dissolving into something that is not in real life anymore. He's taken off the illusion that it's real life. And then at the corner, he signed his name. So he came to visit in October, and when he came, he laid down on the floor and used a marker and signed his name.
I think you should tell the story about the sky.
Yeah.
That sky is from Queens, New York?
That's right. So he's like, I'll tell you another thing that is a mashup. He's like, it's Great Wall of China, but that sky is from Queens, New York, which is, the sky that he saw one day outside his house, which is in Queens, New York. So, this is, I feel like a really important work that shows his vision of what he feels is the way we should go, to move towards a better world for ourselves.
Aileen, can I say something?
Yes.
I was really struck when Hongtu was here. I heard him tell an audience, I am opposed to nationalism. It just separates us. And I thought that was a really apt comment, and it comes out in so many of these pieces.
Yes, and you guys, you should realize, right, that he's lived through that, where, you as a person being marked as different and having to live a life where you're marked as different, it's hard. He's lived through that, and so now he's really using his art to present a different kind of message about how we should be with the people around us and how we should connect to the people around us. Any thoughts? And actually here, I also want to take the opportunity to ask Dan, Dan, in your work, I've heard you talk about that too, that you try to connect people. Can you tell us more about how you do that?
A lot of my work is also about identity, socialized identity. And I think originally it was talking about culture and race and ethnicity, but I've also explored class, background, gender, sexuality. And the piece I'm doing tomorrow night is about nationality. And I'm very interested in how society tries to tell you what you are and what you are not, based on these categories we call identity. And so in my work, a lot of my work is based in personal stories, taking a story from my life or from my family, my community, my culture, and then trying to put it in a large historical context as a way to talk about larger social issues using a personal story to make it tangible and understandable. So I taught a workshop here Tuesday and Wednesday night, and a lot of it was similarly looking at issues of identity, but also around the concept of home. What is home? I love stories, and I think everybody has amazing stories. I think that your journey through life is just inherently dramatic and fascinating and interesting, no matter how you grew up. So I like to use personal stories like in my performances, I present myself kind of like I'm a lab specimen. And here's one person's journey and one person's experiences. And then hopefully it will inspire you to reflect on your own stories and your own journeys. How are they similar? How are they completely different? Because I think it's about us knowing ourselves. And so Zhang Hongtu's work, to me, is a lot about him exploring who he is. That self-portrait is directly looking at him, but to me, these are all self-portraits. These are all about him, like I was saying, reconciling his mixed cultural national experience. And so it's a wonderful example of how a person might do that. He does it with visual images, but other people might do it with poetry or dance or photography or music. But to me, it is about knowing yourself. And I think you, with your stories, however they're expressed, you teach other people who you are, and you teach yourself who you are. So that's kind of how I approach this.
Yeah. Dan is a master storyteller.
Well, I grew up, so my mother, I had a Chinese immigrant father and a Japanese American mother. And my mother was a storyteller. She was sort of the keeper of family history. And so, I don't know, maybe some of you had someone in your family like that who would tell you all these stories about, my grandparents and she would tell us stories about ourselves. When you were little, you did this, And so I kind of grew up with a storytelling tradition. And it's sort of like your own experience and your own history becomes sort of, immortalized through these stories. They become family legends. How many of you have these little family legends of, part of the journey of your family or your personal journey? How many of you have been told by your parents what you were like when you were a little kid or a little baby, or the things you did, or that this is storytelling, and this is about us shaping an image in our minds of who we are and where we come from, So I love stories.
Yeah. And I'll just share one tidbit before we move on. This work, Hongtu created the first one on the 10th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Yeah. So for him, that was a really significant event, and he wanted to honor that. And so he created this to honor that event. Okay, so we're going to go to the next gallery, but before we do, I just want to point out to you that there's a whole section here of the exhibition that I'm not going to take you through because of time, but please do come back. There are a couple of pieces that are both Dan's and my favorites.
It's really cool, but we're not
really
going to
cool.
look at it.
So please come back and check that out. Maybe after our talk, just come back around and just look. You won't be sorry. Okay, so now let's move on to the next gallery. Okay, so this is another work by Hongtu, which is one of my favorite works by him. And when I was starting to think about having this exhibition here, and by the way, this is his first solo exhibition in the Midwest. So we're introducing him to a whole group of new audience. This is an interactive sculpture. So unlike other pieces in a museum, that have signs of do not touch next to it, this is one where you are supposed to interact with it. So what is it? Exactly, it's a ping pong table. But is it your everyday ping pong table that you would find in Varsity Donuts? What's different about this, Colin?
Well, it has a hole in the middle that looks kind of like a figurehead.
That's right, there's a hole on either side of the net. Anybody possibly recognize what the shape is supposed to be? Huh? Chairman Mao. Yeah, so if you guys look at the picture on the wall there, that's a current picture of the Gate of Heavenly Peace in Tiananmen Square, which is the kind of plaza where all the government buildings are, and there's the official portrait of Chairman Mao Zedong. Chairman Mao Zedong was the founder of the Chinese Communist Party, which is the party in power right now in China. So he created this interactive sculpture where now, with the hole in the middle, the rule of the game is that if you play the game and your ball falls through the hole, your opponent gets the point. So to stay in the game, you need to work around the shape of Chairman Mao Zedong. So at this point, I'm gonna ask who wants to play a few passes with Dan? Who knows a little bit of ping pong? Please. Anyone? Please. All right. Hey. Nice. I think you can survive in communist China. Nice. Whoa. Hey, nice.
I think if you hit it in there, you should go to prison.
Uh-oh. So is there anyone who wants to try? Come on. This is fun. Oh, yay. Whoa. Oh. Oh, nice. All right, one more pass and then we'll talk. Whoa. Oh, ooh. All right, so players, I want to get your thoughts about when you're playing on a modified table like this, what are the things that you're considering? What's top on your mind?
Not getting it into their hole, yeah.
Stick with the edges.
Stick with the edges. Dan?
Stay out of trouble.
Yeah, so when you think about this as a kind of a comparison to living a life, where you have this political leader that you have to consider, what do you think Hongtu is making, what is the story that he's trying to tell you that maybe you can figure out by action, by playing on this? Even those of you who haven't played, maybe you can please chime in. Yes?
I think it represents a large chunk of freedom that's lost. You can't play on that area because that's not allowed. We get, I'm assuming, prosecuted or something. Mm-hmm. Do that.
Thoughts? Other thoughts?
Well, I also kind of look at it as, if you think this is representing Chairman Mao, as one meaning, if this is representing the Communist Party, it's slightly different, because perhaps he's an older person. At the time he grew up, Chairman Mao was like God. He was like God, and his presence was everywhere. Nowadays, Chairman Mao is kind of an afterthought. in the history books in China. He's really, his role has been greatly downplayed in current history books, so that what kids are learning in school is, surprisingly, when his relative stature in contemporary China. So to me, in some ways, this is also a historical statement, thinking about the person of Chairman Mao at the time when he was growing up, but whereas now the person of Chairman of Mao Zedong is not that overwhelming. Whereas, of course, the presence of the Communist Party, the role of the Communist Party still is very much limiting what you can do and where you can go and how you can do things. So that kind of occurred to me, that of his particular age and his particular experience giving this particular meaning.
So I should just also say that he made this in 1985. So it's not that far away from the end of the Cultural Revolution, which was in 1978. So it's still kind of fresh, that experience of having this one person in complete power, and basically you have to think about him in every move you do. So for me, this sculpture is, really brilliant in that way, because you have so much fun interacting with it. But then when you stop to think about, well, what was I doing when I was interacting with it, the subject is actually not all joking, right? And Dan, I know you've traveled all around Asia, and you've been to China and performed and worked there, or taught. So when was the last time you went there, and what was your sense?
Let's see. Well, the last time I was there a couple years ago, but the last time I performed there was like 2005, and I did this piece with a buddy of mine who's a traditional Chinese opera artist. He lives in Beijing, and it was a lot about U.S.-China relations. And we used personal stories, we used slapstick comedy, but we kind of realized, oh, you know what? Well, we did it in this kind of underground art gallery in Kunming, China. And, but we thought, oh, then we came back to the States and we polished it and refined it and toured it a little bit here in the US. And then we're thinking, okay, if we want to take this back and tour it in China, okay, is there anything we have to change? So there's, the Chinese government is not known for its sense of humor. Government censors in general are not known for their sense of humor, and we said, oh, well, we can't do that part. And oh, we can't do that part. Oh, they'll never let us do that part. And finally we realized, you know what, we can't do this piece in China. Without him getting in trouble and me getting thrown out of the country. So he works in the film and television industry. He's a writer and a director, and he was explaining to me that every film or television program, the script has to be sent to the government censor to be approved. And they'll say, nope, 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 nope. And he's sort of the script doctor. He knows how to fix people's scripts. But the idea that, oh, wow, now that's something I totally take for granted here, that, I can say whatever I want, And coming back to this sculpture, this piece, I thought, well, that's interesting how Zhang Hongtu, the size he decided to make Mao. He could have made it way bigger, right? He could have made it almost impossible for you to play, but he made it like, it's still playable, you can still live, but you still got to deal with it. So I thought that was an interesting choice that he made of how big to make the obstacle. That if you live in China, or if you grew up there, it was just everyday life. This was sort of an everyday thing, Mao, right? It was just, that was normal. So you just lived with it. And you knew how to work around the restrictions and the limitations of that environment. But it was still livable. 1 billion people live there. It's got to be livable. So I thought that was also an interesting choice, was how big he made the cutout.
That's a really great insight.
yeah, it's still relatively playable.
Any final thoughts before we move on to another gallery? Okay, so now we're gonna go down the hall to the gallery at the end, you know, that you saw when you first came in, and that's the latest work by Zhang Hongtu. All right, so here, this is a gallery that features one work by Hongtu, and it's his latest project. And in fact, he was still putting finishing touches to this work in May 2018, just before it got shipped over here. So this represents Hongtu's latest thinking, you know, about his experiences and what it means to be a person who has all these different cultures and backgrounds that are all part of him. This work is called Gogh Bodhidharma, and basically it's 39 pieces of ink wash paintings done in a Zen painting style. You know, this is traditional East Asian painting. Chinese, Japanese, Korean artists have done, you know, Zen painting. So he actually studied Zen painting and taught himself how to do a Zen painting style. And he was very much inspired by Van Gogh. So Vincent van Gogh was a Dutchman, right, who moved to Paris to start an artist career. So there he is in Paris, a foreigner, right, and trying to get himself into the Paris art world and having a hard time with it, in fact. And Van Gogh, very often, because he was poor, he used himself as a model. And so in his lifetime, he did many self-portraits. And traditionally, at some point, people thought there were 39 self-portraits by Van Gogh. Further scholarship has reduced that number to 37, but at the time that Hongtu was creating this work, there were known 39. So what Hongtu did was to look at every Van Gogh self-portrait, known self-portrait, and make his own ink wash painting a la Zen painting style as a response to it. Now, this work also it references another inspiration to Hongtu, and that is Bodhidharma. And Bodhidharma was the founder of Chan Buddhism. So Bodhidharma most likely was someone who was of Indian descent, and he learned Buddhism and then traveled to China. So at that time, right, you can't take a plane. You're basically walking, pilgrimage, from the West to China, and then settled in China, so he's a foreigner too, and then introduced Chan Buddhism to China. It took hold in China, and from there, the teachings of Chan Buddhism spread to Japan, where it became known as Zen. And so it's this idea of travel, right? People with great ideas who, you know, from using a different language, from a different country, has the courage to travel and go somewhere else to share their ideas because they were so passionate about it, you know, and that experience. And, you know, I think knowing what you know about Hongtu, you can understand why that's an inspiration. And Van Gogh was the same, right? He was a Dutchman, he moved to Paris. You know, he was a foreigner in Paris trying to make it there and belong to the Paris art world. And, you know, for inspiration on his art, he started looking to Japanese art. And he was a collector of he himself in a letter said he had hundreds of Japanese prints. And he was looking at them carefully. If you look in his works, he actually, you can see kind of the ideas that he took and kind of mashed them, you know, and synthesized them with his own to create his own distinctive style. And so this is one work made up of 39 pieces and is a meditation on two people, you know, who have inspired Hongtu, who have been brave and traveled and learned different languages and tried to spread, you know, ideas that they felt passionate about. So the one thing that I can point out is we have a Smartify app. So it's a free app that you can download onto your phone. And I forgot to bring my phone with the Smartify app. I don't know if somebody here museum staff member might have Smartify on their phone who could show us, but you can download it from Google Play Store or iTunes. Is that right? Yeah. Apple Store, and download it for free. And then basically what you do is you point your phone to one of these pieces and it will recognize it and come up with information on individual pieces. Hongtu chose quotes from Van Gogh's letters. Vincent van Gogh wrote hundreds of letters. So Hongtu did his own research and he took quotes that were meaningful to him and he paired a quote that Van Gogh wrote to each piece that he painted. And then also through the Smartify app, you can see the Van Gogh portrait that Hongtu was looking at, and responding to. So this is the paper version of it if you don't want to download the app. But it's more fun with the app because you can zoom in and zoom out of the images. So I invite you to just take a look. And maybe, let me know what your feelings are being in this room surrounded by these works. Anyone want to chime in? No? Those of you who were able to use Smartify or look at this, any thoughts? What do you think? How does Hongtu's work compare to the original Van Gogh painting and how Van Gogh portrayed himself? Is it exactly looking like Van Gogh? Or are there differences, tweaks that Hongtu made?
The eyebrows can sometimes feel like, the one's Japanese demon kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you just describe for us what those eyebrows look like on, say, images of Japanese demons?
It's like really thick and it's like golden and it always looks angry.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed too, that when you look at Hongtu's version and Van Gogh's version, the face is more intense. And one way he does that is by thickening the eyebrows and kind of making them come closer together. Any other observations? Maybe Dan, you have an observation about?
Well, his choice of how to paint the pupils of the eyes, they're these intense black dots in almost all of them. Gives them all a very haunted look. But I thought one thing that struck me about this is that, so Van Gogh was influenced by Asian, specifically Japanese aesthetic and style. In fact, there's even one painting where he says, "Oh, I did a self-portrait where I look like a Japanese." And then Zhang Hongtu is taking that and turning it into his own version. So it's sort of like, wait, well, who's copying who is copying who is copying who? And this sort of multi-layered, it starts to become like a feedback loop of who's influencing who. And are you being influenced by someone else who was influenced by you? So it speaks to his idea of multi-layered experience, of crossing boundaries, crossing cultures, and this intermixing, this just constant intermixing of things.
Yes, Linda.
I was just going to say, building on what you just said, Dan, that Bodhidharma was a foreigner when he came to China, a Central Asian or a person from India. And so by the time that icon got to Japan, artists were looking for ways to make sure he looked like a foreigner. And some of those ways were to make the eyes very deep set, the nose very prominent, the brow very prominent, and even the earring, which, Japanese men were not in the habit of wearing a big hoop earring. So there are so many things about the representation of Bodhidharma that were meant to show ethnic difference. And it's just, like you said, a fascinating loop going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember somebody asking Hongtu when he was visiting here in Kansas, like, how come, all the eyes in his paintings, are kind of like bugging out? And he said, because I wanted to make him look like a foreigner. So it's kind of like him being of Chinese origin, thinking what would make someone look like a foreigner will make them bug-eyed. So it's this idea of, what are our notions of foreignness and how do we translate that? How does it come out, in our own interpretation? So he's kind of bringing our attention to that, I feel. Any other thoughts about this? Do you guys like this work?
Also in the section that we didn't see, that has those, if you go back and see those artifacts, there are these very commonplace, ordinary things from American experience that he has turned into these exotic objects. And they're quite funny. They're quite funny and exquisite at the same time. But it's again, exoticness is in the eye of the beholder. So depending on who you are and what you're familiar with, for a Chinese, blonde hair is really exotic. Ooh, wow, what is that? And so it is it does sort of make you think about what is your perspective on the world, what is your frame of reference, and that the frame of reference that we grew up with is the one that we know and it's the one that's familiar. But and so his experience leaving his home country and adopting a new country and culture, I've always felt like, international travel is going to be the best education you will ever get in your life. That'll teach you more about yourself than anything, is when you leave your familiar frame of reference and go outside of it, as all of these characters have done, that you can see yourself more clearly. So to me, it also speaks to that, the frame of reference,
Yeah. And these figures, right, Van Gogh and Bodhidharma, because of their courage of going out of their comfort zone and their own cultures and their own languages, they're able to be pioneers, right, and start something new. And that's really valuable, right, both of them, they've done that. So I'm gonna just point out one tidbit that I think you guys will enjoy. So if you see this seal, so you guys come on over here, and I urge you to come back and look more closely. You'll see the seal pop up in a lot of Hongtu's works. And in fact, like our lobby desk and the desk in the back, they have a sheet with all the seals that Hongtu made and what they meant. So you can come back and take that cheat sheet and look. But I'll just point out this one extra big square one. And there's an old saying, ancient saying in Chinese that says you can never mate an ox and a cow. You cannot mate an ox and a horse. Two different species, right? You cannot mate them. So Hongtu made this seal, personal seal, and it says, I insist on mating the ox and the horse. That's his statement. And you see this seal show up in a lot of his works. I spotted in a few other ones. But yeah, so look out for that. And that's his personal statement. So any other thoughts that you'd like to share about this work? Yeah?
Is that saying based on astrology?
I don't know.
Because I know that
You think so?
it's a really big culture there.
Yes, but I think in this case it's more like a practical.
Practical, just like you can't make the different species.
Yes, exactly. But I will say that Chinese astrological signs, there are 12 animals that represent a cycle of 12 years. The ox and the horse are both animals in that astrological zodiac set. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Okay, so now we're gonna end our gallery talk over back by the Tidal Wall, okay? So let's all go down the hall. Coming closer. You can't destroy this because this is just a reproduction and you can touch it. Okay, so let's end here in this Tidal Wall. And this is a reproduction of a painting that Hongtu made. He did this whole series of paintings of monkeys. And they're all traveling on top of mountains. And, you know, so it's this landscape with mountains and monkeys, and then some of them have a cityscape, you know, a skyline somewhere in there. Now, can I just have you guys tell me some observations about the monkeys and how they look, and Dan, you can chime in too. So take a look at the monkeys and tell me how Hongtu portrayed them.
They're like partially transparent.
Yeah, they're partially transparent.
They're in between us and the city.
Yep. Any thoughts on, oh, yeah.
Oh, looks like they're running away from the city, or they're scared or something.
Okay. Yeah, the city's far away. What else? Any other observations?
Their limbs look more human than monkey.
How so?
Well, they don't have much hair and just the shape of them. It looks more like a thigh.
Like that one looks like an arm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so going back to your observations, looks transparent, looks like they're running away from the city is what you said. Maybe they almost look like they might be somehow partly human. I know there was another one, what did I miss?
Just that they were in between us and the city. So they were in
Uh-huh. So what kind of story comes up when you have those observations about, you know, all these observations, you know? What kind of story comes up with that? Why did he make them that way, you know, the way you observe them?
It's almost like the modern, or like the city is like making them transparent, or like making them run away.
Cities making them run away? Why?
Maybe they're like losing like their essence, or like what they are.
Yeah, and then you know, yeah, semi-transparent. What's the story behind that? Why are they, you know, semi-transparent? What do you think?
Ghosts.
Yeah,
They're dying.
they're dying. They're becoming ghosts. Oh, pollution. So they're running away. So maybe pollution is driving them away, and they're transparent. So they're becoming ghost-like. So half existing, perhaps? Any other thoughts?
Maybe like ignored, like they're there, but the city refuses to recognize them.
Mm-hmm. And what do you observe about, you know, where the two monkeys are facing, or what's their facial expression? Any observations about facial expression? Concerned? Well, definitely not kind of serious, right? What about the other one?
He's looking back at the skyline.
He's looking back at the skyline. So if you want to construct a story about these two monkeys, what could that story be? Now, we're all about storytelling, right, today?
Run away from
They're running away from home.
Maybe they were like forced to leave, so they lost a part of themselves after they were forced out of their home.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, I'll put in an observation that this part, it's almost like there's nothing there. You know, we don't know what it is anymore. You know, so it's kind of maybe getting erased. And here they are on their patch of mountains, and that's all they've got. When we asked Hongtu, and you know, he did all these beautiful paintings like this, and you know, Linda and I, our director, Linda and I, we love his monkey paintings, but they're all sold out. And all of them are in Taiwan. So due to budget reasons, we could not ship something from Taiwan. So we recreated this reproduction on vinyl and put it up as a tidal wall. And you know, I've known Hongtu for 10 years, and I remember asking him, what do these monkeys mean? What do they stand for? And he handed me a card, and the card said, you can ask me anything except about the monkeys. With a smile. So he intentionally doesn't want to say, because he wants you to create your own stories about them. But then, you know, when he was here and gave a talk, people kept asking him about it in all different ways, you know, that question. And finally he said, you know, for me, the monkeys are in between man and nature. And you know, my observation is they are traveling across that mountain range. So for me, it suggests a journey. And Linda, maybe you want to share your thoughts with us about this.
Well, this isn't the artist's story, but the first time I saw the monkey paintings, I couldn't keep from thinking of the famous Ming Dynasty novel, Journey to the West. It's based on the true adventures of an 8th century Buddhist monk who walked from the capital city in China, Chang'an, to India to get authentic sutras, authentic Buddhist writings to bring back and translate into Chinese. It took him something like 23 years to make the round trip. And in the Ming Dynasty, a novel was written about that story, and so it became a little more fantastic. And he had a supernatural companion, a very powerful monkey king that had lots of superpowers. And so when I thought about Hongtu's journey to the West, to New York City, and then these monkeys, you know, Dan, what you were saying about all these paintings being self-portraits, I couldn't stop thinking about this in some way being about Hongtu's own journey to the West.
And I should add that, you know, the style, how he painted those mountains, they're actually imitating the mountains that you'll see in Buddhist cave paintings around this town called Dunhuang in China, Western China. And Dunhuang, you know, historically had been this town along the Silk Road. So Silk Road is a network of trade routes that went from, you know, Central Asia and all the way to China. And then, you know, and the Central Asian countries also connected to Europe and the Mediterranean. And so it was this basically early global trade network. And Dunhuang was a town that was along that trade route, so that all these people were passing through back and forth. And so I think that it's an intentional reference to use that style of painting, you know, to reference this place, you know, that is a part of an international trade route. And again, that idea that trade route, you know, fostered exchange of ideas and trade goods and people and religion, right, and culture, and how that really enriched all the places along the way. So,
I think Hongtu called his talk at KU The Spirit of
Dunhuang, yeah, that's right. When he came to visit, he gave a lecture, and the title was called In the Spirit of Dunhuang. So it is definitely an idea, you know, and a place that is on his mind. So I want to end the talk by asking you guys for your feelings about the show, you know, and kind of favorite things that popped out to you, or something that maybe you're like, wow, love to hear about it. Please share. Yes?
I had a honor seminar class that came and went through the gallery, and we actually discussed this piece and the ping pong table as well. But it's just kind of cool to hear like what the artist actually had to say about it, and like different perspectives other than like what the class said. Like the ping pong table, we never discussed like how big the holes were. Like we talked about a lot of other things, but we never talked about like the size, and we never considered that like if the ball goes through, that the other person gets a point.
Mm-hmm.
We considered a lot of different things, like just like maybe you have to work together, or like maybe like the goal is to like neither one of you do it, or like maybe the goal is like, we just considered a lot of different things, so it was just interesting to hear other perspectives.
Other thoughts, favorites, likes? No likes? Oh no, then I didn't do my job.
I'm not super versed in the art world, but I've been trying to think of how to word this question. So whenever you have an artist that plays off of things like the Mona Lisa and Van Gogh and uses digital like art form, just kind of like more of an emerging form, when is it an artist using someone else's tools and also just the tools that were handed to them? And when does it kind of change between a reproduction into like something that's tied more to your identity, or
like an original?
Like a more original, like to you, and like where is that line for people that know more than me?
Dan, you want to answer, or you want me to answer?
You can take a shot at it.
I think that's a great question, and I think like in art, it's really hard actually to say this is the original and that is the copy, because ideas get exchanged, and I consider when an artist takes an idea and kind of mulls it over and synthesizes and puts his own voice into it, it's a totally different interpretation. So it's not like that thing, right? And so it's already a new thing. If you want to say that an artist is only a good artist when he does something that nobody has ever done before, then there will be no good art, if that is your definition. Now, and this is also a good opportunity for me to say that with Hongtu, he is following actually very traditional Chinese artistic tradition. Now, unlike in Western artistic tradition, in Chinese tradition, when you are starting out as an artist, the right thing to do is to look at your ancestors, the teachers, the great masters who came before you, and you should be studying them, and you should be copying them. And that's why, actually, you see Hongtu after Van Gogh, after Shi Tao, like that one, and the other paintings that we didn't get to, but if you go back and look, they're all like referencing previous artworks that are really famous in both Western world and Asian world. So, and it's him actually following that Chinese tradition of paying homage, paying honor to the teachers who he has learned from. And so in this case, copying is how you should do it. But as you see in Hongtu's work, he doesn't copy exactly, right? He's taking ideas from his teachers and thinking about them and transforming them to reflect his own experience. And so to me, that is a brilliant work of art. Hopefully that
was a good answer. Well, that was also part of European painting tradition. And in sculpture, is you would make, if you were a student of Rodin, you would make your own Rodin. You would imitate your master, and that was how you developed your technique. And then theoretically, once you reach a certain level of mastery, then you went in your own direction. But there's an old saying that there's no new ideas, just recycled versions of the same concepts of human experience. But I think, like Aileen said, what's remarkable about his work is, one, his technical skill is astounding. Like, if you know the work of Cézanne or Van Gogh, and you see his version of Cézanne, it's like, that is a dead-on Cézanne. The colors, the brush strokes, the composition, but then he does this funny twist. And sometimes his twist is in the concept. The concept being, oh, this is a traditional Chinese painting done in the style of Cézanne. Or he does a twist like here, where he's, chopping up his face with Photoshop and putting it against the background of the Mona Lisa. So, I think that is the difference when you take something that you are referencing or copying, but then your own thinking is also part of what you create. Your own idea is in there somewhere, and whether it's in just the concept or the actual image and execution.
Any other thoughts? What about the things that we've encountered that have been kind of inspiring for you guys? Or maybe now you can copy your hero. Any thoughts? What has been a favorite from what we've seen? Colin?
I just like the diversity of mediums that he's using. I think it's unbelievable that he can do like the black ink and also paint and do digital. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. He has said that for him, he thinks about the concept first, and then he thinks about what is the medium that's going to best express my concept. And so in the case of Van Gogh Bodhidharma, he really studied Zen painting, and practice. He practiced for a long time to be able to get to that level to create those works. Any other questions or thoughts? Well, I have one last question that maybe someone will chime in. So, you can see that in Hongtu, right, he really references his heroes, and then creates something that he can call his own. So what are can you give me a story of someone that you really admire who's inspired you to, in the end, that you ended up creating a path for yourself, even though you started out kind of wanting to be like, this person you admire? Maybe we'll start with Dan. As an artist.
Inspirations? Wow. Well, I started out in painting and drawing, so I loved all the great masters, I loved Picasso because he represented this absolute fearlessness about painting and not being precious about it. But then I was also influenced by people in my life. As a child, we had a friend who was a mixed media sculptor, and we would roam through abandoned buildings in Venice and pick up junk and take it back to a studio, and I'd watch him make it into sculpture and art. And so I think it's a combination of historical figures who inspired me, and then the people in your life who touch you, who show you what's possible, who encourage you, Those are the kind of people who play that role for me. Every now and then you get a really good teacher. You know how a good teacher can do that? A good teacher makes all the difference in the world. It makes you hate or love a subject. A good teacher is a precious thing.
Anybody have a thought you want to share? Okay. All right. Well, I'll end here, and I hope that you guys can, roam around and check out the other parts that we haven't covered, and really appreciate your time, and thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming.
And we're around for questions if you have any. And you can give me your comment cards if you have it, or you can give it to our desk attendant over there. Thank you so much.